For decades, the United States presented itself as the global guardian of democracy, rule of law, and civil liberties. From the Cold War to the modern era, American leaders repeatedly warned the world about the dangers of authoritarianism, centralized power, and political systems built around strongmen. Russia, especially under Vladimir Putin, became the most common example used to illustrate what America claimed it was not. Yet history has a way of turning mirrors toward those who hold them, and today many observers argue that the United States is beginning to reflect the very image it once condemned. This is not a story about one person, one party, or one election. It is a story about systems, incentives, fear, power, and the slow transformation of political culture. The phrase, Putinization of America, is not meant as a slogan, but as a warning, a way to describe trends that feel disturbingly familiar to anyone who has studied modern authoritarian states. When Donald Trump entered American politics, he did not create these trends, but he exposed them. His rise revealed deep fractures in American society, distrust in institutions, and a hunger for strong leadership among millions of citizens who felt ignored by elites. Similar conditions existed in post-Soviet Russia during the 1990s, when economic chaos, corruption, and national humiliation created the perfect environment for a leader who promised strength, order, and national pride. Trump's political style broke long-standing American norms. He openly attacked the media, labeling journalists enemies of the people, a phrase historically associated with authoritarian regimes. He questioned the legitimacy of elections before they even took place, claimed widespread conspiracies against him, and framed politics as a battle between real Americans and internal enemies. These tactics were not new to the world, but they were new to the American mainstream. What made this shift more alarming was not only the rhetoric, but the response. Institutions that were supposed to act as neutral guardians of democracy became openly partisan. Trust in courts, intelligence agencies, law enforcement, and even the electoral process itself declined sharply. When people stop believing in institutions, they begin believing in individuals instead. This is one of the most critical steps in the transformation of a democracy into something else. In Russia, Vladimir Putin consolidated power gradually. Independent media outlets were marginalized, critical voices were labeled as foreign agents, and loyalty to the state was framed as loyalty to the leader. In America, the process has been messier and more chaotic, but the direction has raised similar concerns. Media ecosystems split into parallel realities, where facts became optional and loyalty to political identity mattered more than truth. Social media accelerated this process. Algorithms rewarded outrage, fear, and division. Political leaders learned that emotional manipulation was more effective than policy discussion. As a result, politics became a constant state of crisis. Every election was framed as the last chance to save the nation. Every opponent was portrayed as an existential threat. In such an environment, extraordinary measures begin to feel justified. Another key element of authoritarian systems is selective justice. Laws are applied unevenly, depending on political alignment. In Russia, critics of the government often face legal pressure, while loyalists are protected. In the United States, accusations of double standards have grown louder on all sides. Supporters of Trump claim the legal system is weaponized against him. His opponents argue that powerful figures are still treated too gently. Regardless of which narrative one believes, the damage lies in the perception itself. Once people believe justice is political, the rule of law weakens. National identity also plays a central role. Putin rebuilt Russian identity around strength, tradition, and resistance to Western influence. Trump's "Make America Great Again" message similarly framed the nation as having been betrayed from within and humiliated from abroad. Both narratives rely on nostalgia for a past that feels safer and more powerful than the present. Both promise restoration rather than reform. Foreign policy reveals another layer of similarity. Strongman politics often prioritize transactional relationships over alliances built on shared values. Under Trump, America's traditional alliances were questioned, international institutions were dismissed, and diplomacy was personalized. This mirrored Russia's approach, where loyalty and leverage matter more than rules. Critics argue that America still has free elections, independent courts, and a vibrant civil society, and that is true. The United States has not become Russia. But Putinization, does not mean copying a system overnight. It means adopting methods, language, and attitudes that normalize power concentration, undermine trust, and redefine democracy as rule by those who claim to represent the real people. One of the most dangerous shifts is the idea that losing an election is impossible unless the system is rigged. This belief destroys the foundation of peaceful power transfer. When leaders refuse to accept defeat, supporters may feel justified in rejecting democratic outcomes. History shows that once this line is crossed, societies enter unpredictable and often violent territory. Another parallel lies in the treatment of dissent. In authoritarian systems, criticism is framed as disloyalty. In modern American politics, disagreement is increasingly seen as betrayal. Citizens are encouraged to view each other not as political opponents, but as enemies. This emotional polarization makes compromise impossible and crisis permanent. It is important to understand that these trends are not uniquely American or Russian. They are global. From Europe to Asia, democracies are struggling with similar pressures: economic inequality, cultural anxiety, rapid technological change, and information overload. Strong leaders thrive in uncertainty. They promise clarity in a confusing world. The danger lies not in one leader, but in the habits a society forms while supporting or resisting that leader. When people excuse norm breaking because our side is doing it, they normalize the behavior for the future. What one leader starts, another may perfect. So the question is not whether America has become authoritarian. The question is whether it is willing to recognize the warning signs before they harden into permanent features. Democracies do not collapse suddenly. They erode slowly, through apathy, fear, and justified exceptions. The irony is profound. For years, America warned the world about Russia's political system, about the dangers of centralized power, controlled narratives, and loyalty over law. Now, many of those warnings echo back toward Washington itself. Not as an accusation, but as a reminder. History does not repeat itself exactly, but it often rhymes. The Putinization of America is not destiny. It is a crossroads. The outcome depends on whether institutions are defended, norms are restored, and citizens demand accountability from all leaders, not just the ones they oppose. In the end, democracy is not protected by flags, slogans, or personalities. It is protected by restraint, truth, and the willingness to lose power peacefully. When those values weaken, any nation, no matter how powerful, can begin to resemble what it once condemned. Ride and Fly looks beyond headlines to understand these deeper patterns, because the future is shaped not by what we say we believe, but by what we are willing to tolerate.